I'll never forget the look on Marcus's face when we pulled into his parents' driveway after our vacation in Maine, where there should have been neatly stacked recycling bins containing the remnants of the old kitchen renovation. There was now a giant dumpster overflowing with what looked like brand new cabinets, the ones my husband had spent weeks installing. "No," he whispered, fumbling with his seatbelt. "No, no, no. We have left the newly renovated kitchen just 7 days ago. A beautiful space with warm maple cabinets, granite countertops, and the vintage-style fixtures Marcus knew his mother had always dreamed about. He had spent 3 months of evenings and weekends working on it, using the skills he'd learned from his father. Now, through the large kitchen window, we could see men in work uniforms carrying out pieces of what looked like high-end modern cabinetry. My mother-in-law, Diana, stood in the middle of it all, pointing and directing like a conductor leading an orchestra. Marcus was out of the car before I could stop him. I quickly followed, my heart pounding. We had kept the renovation a secret, using the spare key his father had given us years ago, working while his parents spent their annual 2 months in Florida. It was supposed to be a surprise, a tribute to both his mother's dreams and his father's memory. "Mom," Marcus's voice cracked as he burst through the front door. "What are you doing?" Diana turned, her perfectly coiffed silver hair catching the light. "Oh, you're back early," she said, as if she'd been caught preparing a surprise party rather than destroying her son's labor of love. "I was hoping to have this finished before you returned." "Finished?" Marcus gestured wildly at the chaos around us. "You're tearing out everything. Why?" "Well, darling," Diana adjusted her designer glasses. While the gesture was sweet, I couldn't possibly keep that amateur renovation. What would the neighbors think? The country club ladies? Besides, I've hired Stefan, the designer who did the Henderson's kitchen. He's giving me something much more appropriate. I watched my husband's face crumple. 3 months of work, $40,000 of our savings, and countless hours of planning, all gone. But worse than that was the dismissal of the meaning behind it all. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, "Dad and I planned this before he died." Diana's perfectly composed face flickered for just a moment. My father-in-law, Jack, had passed away 4 months ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. In his final weeks, he and Marcus had spent hours poring over kitchen design magazines, drawing plans, and talking about how to finally give Diana the kitchen she always wanted, but they'd never been able to afford. "Your father," Diana's voice was sharp, "would have wanted me to have the best, not some DIY project." "The best?" Marcus walked over to the dumpster visible through the window. Those cabinets were handcrafted by Anderson's, Dad's favorite local woodworker. The granite was from the same quarry as the sample you've kept in your drawer for 20 years. The fixtures, his voice broke, the fixtures were exact replicas of the ones from your grandmother's kitchen that you always talked about. I stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "Diana," Marcus spent weeks researching everything you'd ever mentioned wanting in a kitchen. He used all the skills Jack taught him over the years. "Skills?" Diana laughed brittlely. "My son is a software engineer, not a contractor." Jack's little hobby woodworking lessons weren't exactly professional training. "Little hobby?" Marcus's voice rose. "Dad restored furniture for half the houses in this neighborhood. He built your dining room table, your bedroom set, the nursery furniture for when I was born." "Yes, because we couldn't afford better then." Diana snapped. "But now I can finally have what I deserve. Professional work. Designer labels. Things I can actually show off to my friends." The contractors had stopped working, awkwardly trying to appear busy while this family drama unfolded. Stefan, a tall man in an absurdly expensive-looking suit, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Matthews, should we continue with the installation?" Before Diana could answer, Marcus walked to the corner where a single cabinet door lay, somehow overlooked in the destruction. He picked it up, running his fingers over the inside edge. "Did you even look?" he asked his mother quietly. "Did you even bother to see what you were throwing away?" Diana's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. "What do you mean?" Marcus turned the cabinet door over. There, carved into the wood in Jack's distinctive style, was a message. For Diana, who dreamed of cooking in a kitchen as beautiful as she is. Love, Jack and Marcus. Every cabinet, every drawer, had contained a similar message, little love notes from a dying man to his wife, carved by their son's hands. Diana's face went pale. I didn't know. No, Marcus said, his voice heavy with grief and disappointment. You didn't look. You didn't ask. You just assumed, like always, that anything involving Dad's skills, anything made by family hands, wasn't good enough. He placed the cabinet door carefully on the counter. Dad spent his last weeks teaching me every detail he could remember about your dream kitchen. Every conversation you'd ever had about it, every magazine page you'd saved. He wanted so badly to give this to you himself. But when he knew he couldn't, he asked you to do it, I finished softly, remembering the night Jack had called Marcus to his hospital bed, making him promise to complete this one last project. Diana reached for the cabinet door with trembling hands, her fingers tracing Jack's carved words. For the first time, I saw her perfect facade crack, revealing the grief she'd been hiding beneath her busy renovations and social appearances. Marcus, she whispered, I didn't know. I never thought. But Marcus was already walking away, leaving his mother standing in the ruins of not just a kitchen, but perhaps their relationship as well. As I followed him out, I heard Diana's sharp intake of breath as she finally, truly looked at what she destroyed. And in the dumpster, amid the discarded pieces of love and memory, lay dozens of cabinet doors, each bearing a final message from a husband to his wife, carved by their son's hands. The drive home was silent, Marcus's hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I wanted to comfort him, but sometimes silence is the only appropriate response to heartbreak. When we got home, Marcus walked straight to his workshop in the garage, the space where his father had taught him woodworking every Sunday for 20 years. I watched through the window as he stood there, staring at his father's old tools now hanging on the walls. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Please help me fix this. Before I could respond, another message came through. The contractors found more messages. In the drawers, under the counters, everywhere. I stepped into the garage, the familiar smell of sawdust and varnish wrapping around us like a comfort blanket. Your mom texted, I said softly. Marcus picked up an old hand plane, his father's favorite tool. You know what Dad said when he gave me his tools? His voice was rough with unshed tears. He said, money buys things, son, but hands create legacy. The phone buzzed again. Diana had sent a photo. A contractor holding a piece of the demolished kitchen. Carved into it was a message. Remember our first apartment? That tiny kitchen where you made me fall in love with your cooking? Jack. There's more, I said, showing Marcus the phone. They're finding them everywhere. He sat heavily on his workbench. We carved 63 messages, one for every year they were together. Dad dictated each one from his hospital bed. Another text arrived, this time a video. Diana's usually steady hands shook as she filmed the demolition pieces laid out on her lawn. Each segment revealed another hidden message, another memory, another piece of Jack's final gift to her. I spent every night for 2 weeks carving those messages, Marcus said. Dad would tell me the exact spots he wanted them. Put this one where she'll find it when she's reaching for her morning coffee, he'd say. Or this one goes where she stands to make her famous pot roast. The phone rang. Diana's name flashed on the screen. Please, she said when I answered, her voice uncharacteristically small. Please come back. Both of you. I need to see everything before it's too late. I looked at Marcus, who was still holding his father's plane. Your choice, I said softly. He closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. When we arrived back at the house, the scene had changed dramatically. The contractors were carefully laying out pieces of the demolished kitchen on tarps in the backyard, treating each fragment like an archaeological discovery. Diana stood in the middle of it all, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. I found the one about our first date, she said as we approached, and the one about the Christmas I burned the turkey, and her voice broke, the one about the night Marcus was born. Marcus walked to the nearest tarp, kneeling to examine a piece of crown molding. Remember when you said you wanted a kitchen fit for a queen? He read aloud. You've always been my queen. Jack. He said that to me on our wedding day, Diana whispered. I didn't know. I never thought to look. Stephen, the designer, approached cautiously. Mrs. Matthews, about the new cabinets. Get them out of my house. Diana snapped, then caught herself. Please, just get them out. She turned to Marcus, her carefully maintained composure completely gone. Can any of this be saved? Marcus surveyed the destruction. I could see him calculating, measuring, assessing. just like his father had taught him. "The pieces are all here," he said finally. "It would take time, but—" He picked up another fragment, running his fingers over the carved words. "Dad always said anything can be fixed if you have enough patience and the right tools." "Would you?" Diana asked. "Would you try? I know I don't deserve it, but—" "Dad deserves it," Marcus cut her off. "His last project deserves to be completed." Diana nodded, understanding the terms. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a chance to honor Jack's memory, to finally see the value in what her husband and son could create with their hands. "I have all his old notebooks," she said suddenly, "in the attic. Every project he ever worked on, every measurement, every detail. I never threw them away, even though you pretended to be embarrassed by his work," Marcus finished. "Yes," she admitted, "because it was easier than admitting I was proud of him. Easier than explaining to my friends why my husband chose to work with his hands when he could have had a corporate career." She walked to a large piece of the demolished island. "In this kitchen, I hope you'll continue teaching our grandchildren your secret recipes," she read Jack's carved words. "They may not be here yet, but I know they'll love cooking with you as much as I did." Marcus touched the carved letters, his father's last words about a future he wouldn't see. "He laid out the island specifically so kids could sit safely and watch the cooking," he said. "He planned everything thinking about family gatherings that haven't even happened yet." Diana looked around at the scattered pieces of her husband's final gift. "I've spent so many years trying to impress people who didn't matter," she said quietly. "And in doing so, I hurt the people who did." She turned to Marcus. "Your father was an artist. You are too. I've been so blind, so worried about appearances that I couldn't see the masterpiece right in front of me. Dad used to say that the best things in life have fingerprints on them, not price tags," Marcus replied. Diana picked up a piece of wood that still showed the marks of careful craftsmanship. "Then let's put our fingerprints all over this kitchen. Show me how to help rebuild it. Teach me what your father taught you." It wasn't a complete resolution. Years of dismissed talents and devalued skills couldn't be fixed in a single afternoon. But as I watched my husband begin to sort through the pieces with his mother, I saw the first steps toward healing. And somewhere, I imagined Jack Matthews was smiling, watching his wife finally understand that true worth isn't found in designer labels or social approval, but in the careful work of loving hands and the legacy of a father's lessons carried forward by his son. 3 months later, I stood in Diana's kitchen, watching my husband and mother-in-law work side by side. The transformation wasn't just in the space, it was in them. Diana, her usually pristine clothes covered in sawdust, was carefully sanding the cabinet door, while Marcus showed her how to feel for the right smoothness. Her designer friends had stopped coming around as frequently when they learned she canceled the high-end renovation, but she hardly seemed to notice their absence. "Your father taught me to cook in our first kitchen," Diana said, running her fingers over the wood grain. "But I never learned to appreciate the space he created for me to do it in." Each piece of the original renovation had been carefully salvaged, restored, and reinstalled. Where things couldn't be saved, Marcus crafted new pieces, teaching his mother along the way. And in every new piece, they added their own messages alongside Jack's restored ones. "Look what I found in Dad's notebooks," Marcus said, pulling out a weathered sketch. "He designed this spice rack 30 years ago, but never built it because you said it wouldn't match the decor." Diana took the sketch, her eyes soft. "I remember. I wanted one of those trendy metal ones instead." She traced the detailed drawings. His design was better. Together, they built that spice rack over the past week, Diana learning to use the same tools that had once embarrassed her. She carved her own message inside. "I'm finally learning to see the beauty in what you always saw." The kitchen was coming alive again, but differently this time. Every piece had a story, every repair marked a lesson learned, every restored message brought Jack's presence back into the space. Mrs. Henderson called again, I mentioned, helping to unwrap the restored vintage-style fixtures. She wanted to know if you're still coming to the country club renovation committee meeting. Diana shook her head, focused on fitting a drawer into place. "I resigned last month. Thursdays are my woodworking lessons now," she smiled at Marcus. "Besides, I'm learning that the best renovations have heart, not just high price tags." The local woodworking community had embraced Diana's transformation. Anderson, who'd crafted the original cabinets, now spent Sunday afternoons in Marcus's workshop, sharing stories about Jack and teaching both mother and son advanced techniques. Dad would love this, Marcus said, stepping back to survey their work. Not just the kitchen, but this. He gestured between himself and Diana. Us learning together, creating together. Diana wiped her hands on her work apron, a far cry from her former designer outfits. I found something else in the attic, she said. I think it's time you had it. She disappeared upstairs and returned with a small wooden box. I recognized Jack's craftsmanship immediately. He made this the week before. Diana's voice caught. Before he went into the hospital. Said it was for when the kitchen was finished. Marcus opened the box carefully. Inside lay his father's favorite carving tools and a note. For the next generation of builders in our family. Love, Dad. He knew, Diana said softly. He knew this kitchen would either bring us together or break us apart. He was giving us a choice. And we almost made the wrong one, Marcus replied, but there was no bitterness in his voice now. I watched them return to their work, noting how Diana's movements had become more confident with the tools, how Marcus had adopted his father's habit of humming while he worked. The kitchen was nearly complete, but the real project, the rebuilding of their relationship, had only just begun. As evening fell, Diana insisted we stay for dinner. She pulled out Jack's old recipe box, no longer hidden away in a drawer, but proudly displayed on the counter he crafted. Your father's pot roast, she announced, in honor of our first family meal in the new kitchen. As we ate, sitting at the island Jack had designed for future grandchildren, Diana touched one of the carved messages visible on the cabinet face. A kitchen is just a room until love makes it a home. I understand now, she said quietly, what Jack was trying to tell me all those years. It was never about having the perfect kitchen. It was about creating something together, Marcus finished. About leaving our mark on the world, not buying someone else's. The kitchen gleamed around us, every surface holding memories both old and new. Jack's messages merged with freshly carved ones from Diana and Marcus, telling a story of loss, learning, and love rebuilt. And there in the space that had almost torn them apart, mother and son found their way back to each other, guided by the loving hands of the man who had known all along that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we have to work hardest to preserve. Diana reached for Marcus's hand across the island. Thank you, she said simply, for not giving up on me, for teaching me what your father always knew. Marcus squeezed her hand, and in that gesture, I saw the final piece of Jack's legacy fall into place. The understanding that true worth isn't found in what we have, but in what we create together.